Welcome to your storytelling. Enjoy the stories, and don't forget to subscribe. I never imagined I'd uncover his dark secret. The day everything changed started like any other. I was sorting through some of his papers when I came across something odd. A bank statement? Something didn't sit right. I could feel it in my gut. Payments to escort services I didn't recognize. At first, I thought it was a mistake. But deep down, I knew it was real. What was going on? Why had he kept this hidden? My mind started racing with questions I didn't want to ask, but knew I had to. I sat there, staring at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. The numbers didn't make sense. Payments, large ones, to services I never even knew existed. Each entry looked almost identical. The same amount, same company. I kept scrolling, trying to make sense of it, hoping there was an explanation. I knew I had to confront him, but a part of me didn't want to face the truth. Could I really be married to a man who was hiding something this dark? My hands trembled as I reached for my phone. I couldn't stop thinking about the bank statement. I kept going back to it, scanning the numbers over and over again. Late that night, while he was in the shower, I took a chance. I checked his phone. It was unlocked. At first, it seemed normal. Text messages, emails. But then I saw it. The name of the same escort service. And a number that kept showing up in his phone records. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It was every week. My stomach churned. I had to know more. My heart raced as I saw the name pop up on his phone again. The same number, the same pattern, late-night calls, always the same person. I couldn't take it anymore. The curiosity mixed with dread as I started digging deeper. It wasn't just a random call or a small mistake. This was something bigger. Something he had been hiding for who knows how long. Each new detail felt like a betrayal, and yet I couldn't stop myself. I needed to know the truth, even if it meant losing everything. The more I uncovered, the more confused I became. The payments, the phone calls, the secrecy. It all pointed in one horrifying direction. I knew I had to confront him, but what would I say? What words could capture the magnitude of what I was feeling? Anger? Hurt? Disbelief? He'd always been so charming, so loving. How could he have kept something so huge from me? It didn't make sense. But there it was, in black and white. Proof of a life I didn't know existed. A life he had been living behind my back. I could feel the weight of the truth pressing on me as I looked through the phone records. The more I found, the more pieces of the puzzle fell into place. There were no excuses for what I was seeing. Payments for services, arrangements made, meetings set. It was clear he had been living a double life. But why? Why had he lied to me? Why had he hidden this from me? I felt betrayed, lost in a sea of emotions I couldn't control. How could I even begin to confront him with this? I could no longer keep quiet. That evening, I confronted him. My voice was shaky, but I couldn't hold it in anymore. "What's this?" I asked, my hand shaking as I showed him the bank statement. His face went pale. He tried to avoid my gaze, but I saw the guilt written all over him. He knew there was no way out. The silence between us felt deafening. I waited for an explanation, but all I got was a nervous sigh and the heavy weight of his avoidance. It was as if he knew the truth was about to come crashing down. His eyes darted around, unable to meet mine. Finally, he sighed deeply and whispered, "I've been running an escort business." The words hit me like a physical blow. I felt the ground shift beneath me. "What do you mean?" I whispered, my voice trembling with disbelief. He looked at me, his face pale, his voice barely audible as he explained. I couldn't understand. It felt like I had been knocked off balance, like everything I knew about him was a lie. I needed answers, but the truth was so much worse than I could have imagined. The confession was out, but I couldn't process it. "I've been pretending to be straight, arranging meetings with other men," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. My mind couldn't absorb the words. This wasn't the man I had married. I had thought he was one thing, and now he was something completely different. How long had this been going on? How long had I been in the dark? I stared at him, frozen, not knowing whether to scream, cry, or run away. Everything felt surreal. How could I trust anything anymore? The reality of it all set in. For years, he admitted, his voice barely audible. The betrayal stung like 1,000 needles. I felt the tears start to well up, but I couldn't let them fall. Not yet. I needed to hear everything. I needed to understand how deep this had gone. Every word he said felt like a blow to my chest. My heart ached. I thought I knew him. I thought I was his everything. But now, it felt like I had been living in a dream world. The man I thought I loved had been lying to me all along. How could you? I asked, my voice cracking as I felt the tears threatening to fall. How could you do this to me? To us? The questions tumbled out faster than I could process them. I wanted to scream, to throw something, but all I could do was stare at him. His face was filled with shame, but that didn't make it any better. All these years, I had been faithful, had trusted him completely. How could he betray me like this? How could he betray us? I didn't even know who he was anymore. He tried to explain himself, but the words sounded hollow, empty. I didn't want you to know, he said softly, almost pleading. I didn't want to hurt you, but I couldn't stop. I didn't know how to get out of it. His excuses only made the pain worse. How could he think hiding this from me was protecting me? He had been living a lie, pretending to be someone he wasn't. And now, I had to pay the price. My mind raced with questions, and each one seemed to make the wound deeper. How long? I demanded. I needed to know the full extent of his lies. How long have you been doing this? He wouldn't look at me. His eyes were downcast, filled with shame and guilt, but they weren't enough to hide the truth. For years, he admitted. The words hit me like a physical blow. I couldn't process them at first. I wanted to deny it, to say it wasn't true, but the proof was there. The bank statements, the phone records, everything. The man I had loved for so long had been living a secret life. The silence between us felt suffocating. The man I had married, the man I had trusted, was no longer the person sitting across from me. I had been living in a lie, and now everything had come crashing down. I wanted to run, to escape this nightmare, but I couldn't. I was trapped in this reality, forced to confront the truth that I didn't want to see. I thought we had a life together, I whispered, my voice shaking with emotion. I thought we were happy. We were, he replied, but his voice lacked conviction. It didn't matter anymore. His words meant nothing. The years we spent together, the family we built, all felt like a lie. I had been a fool. I had believed him. I had trusted him. And now, everything was shattered. My heart was broken, my trust destroyed. How could I go on? How could I ever look at him the same way again? His actions had changed everything, and I didn't know how to move forward. I stood up, pacing around the room. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't think straight. Every step I took felt heavy, like I was carrying the weight of the world. The anger and sadness mixed in my chest, making it hard to breathe. You've been with other men, I said, my voice trembling with fury. I could barely keep it together, but I had to ask. I had to know how deep this went. His silence was answer enough. The truth hung in the air between us, thick and suffocating. Yes, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I've been with other men. I thought I could keep it separate, that I could have this marriage and live my truth on the side. But it was never enough. His words cut deep. The life I thought we had was a facade. He wasn't the man I thought he was. The man I married was gone, replaced by a stranger who had hidden this dark, twisted side of himself from me for years. The betrayal was overwhelming, crushing me from the inside out. How could you? I repeated, my voice breaking. How could you lie to me all this time? How could you keep this secret from me, from us? I could feel the tears now, but I fought them back. I couldn't let him see me break. Not yet. Not when I still didn't know if I could ever forgive him. He was sitting there, guilty, but it wasn't enough. His apology meant nothing to me. The damage had been done. I didn't know how to face him, how to face this new reality. The truth was too painful. I wanted the family, he continued, his voice shaking. I wanted to be with you, but I couldn't deny who I was. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him that his confession was worthless, that his reasons didn't matter. But I couldn't. There was too much anger, too much pain in me to speak. I wanted him to understand how much he had hurt me, how much he had destroyed. But I knew he couldn't. He didn't fully understand the depth of the betrayal, the trust he had shattered. I sat down, my body shaking. I felt like I was losing control, like I was about to fall apart. How could this be real? How could the man I had trusted, the man I thought I knew, do this to me? The tears finally came, and I let them fall. My heart ached with the weight of it all. How could I go on living in this house, with this man? The man who had lied to me, who had broken me in ways I couldn't even begin to explain. My mind was spinning, and I didn't know how to stop it. He reached for me, but I pulled away. I couldn't let him touch me, not after everything. His fingers hovered in the air, hesitant, as if he could sense the space between us that had grown too wide to bridge. "Please," he whispered. "I never wanted to hurt you." But his words didn't make it any better. The damage was done, and no amount of pleading could undo what had happened. His hands, once comforting, now felt like chains, binding me to a past I no longer wanted. I stood up, my voice cold and distant. "You've shattered everything," I said, struggling to hold back the tears. "The trust, the love, it's all gone now. I don't even know who you are anymore." He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret, but it wasn't enough. How could I ever go back to the way things were? How could I forget the life he had been secretly leading? There was no going back, no way to erase the pain he had caused. The life I thought we had was a lie, and now I had to figure out how to move on. "I need space," I said, my voice trembling with the weight of everything I was feeling. I needed to get away from him, from this house, from this life. I couldn't stay here, couldn't pretend that everything was fine. "I can't do this anymore," I whispered, more to myself than to him. His face crumpled, and for a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. But then I remembered everything. All the lies, the secrets, the betrayal. I couldn't let myself feel sorry for him. Not when he had done this to me. "Please don't leave," he begged. But his voice was weak, empty. I had heard his apologies 100 times, but none of them mattered. "I'll do anything," he said, desperation seeping into his voice. "I'll stop. I'll change." But how could I believe him? How could I trust anything he said? His promises were just words, and words meant nothing when they were built on lies. "You've already shown me who you are," I said, my voice steady now. "I don't think I can ever trust you again." I packed my bags, my hands shaking as I stuffed my clothes into a suitcase. I could hear him calling my name from behind, but I ignored him. There was nothing left to say. He had made his choice, and now I had to make mine. I couldn't stay in this marriage. The trust had been broken beyond repair, and I couldn't keep pretending. It was time to walk away. I wasn't sure where I was going, but I knew I couldn't stay here, trapped in a life that had been built on lies. I left that night, not looking back. The house felt empty, as if everything inside it had been hollowed out. I couldn't bring myself to feel sorry for him. As I drove away, I realized how much of myself I had lost in this marriage, how much I had given up, thinking everything was fine. But now, I was free. Free from the lies, free from the betrayal. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure. I would never let anyone control me like this again. The days after I left were a blur. I stayed with friends, slowly trying to piece myself back together. But the pain of it all stayed with me. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, filled with guilt and regret. I wondered if he ever truly understood what he had done. But then I reminded myself that it didn't matter. He had chosen his path, and now I had to choose mine. It was time to start over, to rebuild my life from the ground up. And though the road ahead seemed uncertain, I knew I would find my way. Weeks passed, and I started to heal. Slowly, but surely, the raw pain started to fade. I focused on myself, on rediscovering who I was outside of that toxic marriage. I found strength I didn't know I had. I started to laugh again, to feel joy. I realized that I didn't need him. I never needed him. I was enough on my own. And though the scars of what had happened would always be there, I knew they wouldn't define me. I was stronger than I had ever been. Then one day, he called. It was the first time in weeks that I had heard his voice. He apologized again, but I could barely bring myself to listen. I had moved on. I had found peace in the silence. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice shaking. "I know I've ruined everything." I didn't respond right away. What was there to say? The man I had once loved was gone, and all that was left was an apology. But it was too late for apologies. The damage had been done, and I had already made my choice. So I moved on. It wasn't easy, but it was the only choice I had. I found strength in my own independence, in knowing that I could survive without him. The hurt, the betrayal, the lies, it was all in the past now. I had a new life ahead of me, one where I was free to be myself, without the shadows of his deception hanging over me. And as I walked away from it all, I knew that no matter what happened next, I was going to be okay, because I had finally learned that I could live without him.